Using acceptance and commitment therapy and positive reinforcement to reduce daily phone usage by Jesse Hinman, Lauren Lang, and Gabrielle Moss. Lepp, Barkley, and Karpinski examine the relationship between cell phone usage, academic performance, and anxiety in students. Surveys were given out to participants within the survey where there were 7 separate sections regarding various topics, such as demographic information to questions regarding the amount of time spent on cell phones while in class. The results of their study showed those who spent time on their cell phone throughout classroom time were shown to have a lower GPA than those who did not. Another experiment looked at engaged classes without cell phones by Katz and Lambert. The purpose of the experiment was to implement a method which used positive reinforcement to effectively remove cell phones from the classroom with incorporating student engagement and class participation. Students did not have to participate, they were given a choice every class period. If they chose to participate, they turned their cell phones off at the beginning of each class session and placed the device at the front of the room in a designated area. Every day they chose to participate, they were given 1 extra credit point towards the final grade. The results of the study showed that those who participated had a better overall GPA compared to those who did not participate in the experiment. Larwin and Larwin did an investigation to decrease media usage on a device and increase physical activity among a young adolescent female who participated in the study. A changing criterion design was used for this particular study. If the participant went above and beyond the goal, the participant could earn up to an hour of cell phone usage extra. If she did not meet that goal, then she was not given internet time for that day.
In a study done by McDonald, the purpose of the experiment was to compare in-class texting behavior with the participants' final exam grades, ACT scores, and GPA. Students received a survey on the last day of classes asking various questions regarding in-class texting behavior. A Likert scale was measuring from never, rarely, sometimes, and frequently. The results indicated the more the student engaged in class texting, the more likely the student had a lower final grade in the course. A study by Young assessing internet addiction using cognitive behavioral therapy suggested that the disorder is associated with social, academic, familial, and occupational impairments. The method included counseling behavioral issues focusing on the use of computer programs, online applications, and its associated with underlying factors contributing to job burnout or academic troubles. 15% of problems associated with compulsive internet usage were associated with academic problems. ACT, which stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, is used to contact the present moment fully and consciously as a human being and change the targeted behavior. ACT links together the patterns of committed actions with values to create a very similar form of traditional behavior therapy. And ACT can be a behavioral change method that can be used for any shaping method, goal setting, and skill acquisition. Self as context refers to the notion that you or the self is not your thoughts and feelings. Values are the meaningful direction that an individual's life stands for. Committed actions are the steps that are taken and complete goals that line up to the person's values. The purpose of the current study was to evaluate the effectiveness of ACT plus reinforcement to decrease daily phone usage in 3 high school students by using a changing criterion design with a multiple baseline across subjects component.
For this study, 3 high school girls, Tina, Louise, and Linda, were identified by their parents as having high levels of daily phone usage throughout the school week. Prior to beginning the study, the purpose and possible benefits were discussed with each participant individually, and each girl indicated that they were interested in participating and informed consent was given. Tina, Louise, and Linda all played different sports, and while they shared some of the same classes, parents and teachers indicated that the 3 girls were not close friends nor spent time together outside of class or during free periods. The present study took place in two different settings. The reinforcement component took place at the participant's home, where the parent was in charge of administering extra phone time for the night as well as taking the phone away. ACT sessions took place in an empty teacher's office at the high school. Sessions were 15 to 30 minutes long and took place twice a week during the participant's morning free period. Prior to beginning the study, each girl met with the experimenter and downloaded the Screen Time app onto their phone. This app was linked to a secure email that only the experimenters had access to. The application allowed experimenters to access information regarding the participants' phone usage for the day online using the secure login. Experimenters could only access information regarding daily usage time. When opening the application, the participant was able to see their current daily usage for the present day as well as total usage duration for previous days. All participants indicated they understood how the app worked and signed a consent form indicating that they would continue to use it throughout the study. The dependent variable was total duration of daily cell phone usage during the school week, which was Monday through Friday. Cell phone usage was defined as the amount of time that the screen was turned on and the phone was being used. The independent variables being evaluated were positive reinforcement and ACT plus positive reinforcement. Due to the nature of data collection via direct electronic reporting, IOA was not absolutely necessary. However, a second experimenter always verified that the data was transferred from the application onto the datasheet correctly. Procedural reliability was calculated on a weekly basis for the parents' role in the study. Every night at 11 p.m., parents were sent an electronic procedural reliability checklist to calculate the percentage of steps completed correctly by the parent for that week. This was calculated to be 96% during baseline conditions. Once positive reinforcement was implemented, parents were to complete a checklist similar to the one used in baseline with the addition of providing reinforcement. For all three participants, mean procedure reliability was calculated to be 98%. It was found that procedure reliability was on average 99% accurate and that parents took their daughter's phone away at the correct time. Procedure reliability was also calculated for weekly ACT sessions in which the participant met with the experimenter. To ensure that all the steps were completed correctly for that week, for all ACT sessions, procedure reliability was 100%. The current study used a concurrent multiple baseline across subjects design embedded within a changing criterion design in order to evaluate the effectiveness in using ACT with positive reinforcement to reduce daily phone usage duration. A changing criterion design was chosen to show that when criterion for reinforcement was adjusted, a change in behavior was also observed, demonstrating a functional relationship. In addition, a multiple baseline across subjects was used in order to assess the effectiveness of using ACT in order to decrease the amount of time it took participants to reach mastery of a particular criterion level. Baseline conditions were introduced for all three participants at the same time. The positive reinforcement condition was first introduced to Tina when her baseline levels of daily phone usage were observed to be stable. Once Tina met the first criterion level for 3 consecutive weekdays, a second criterion level was introduced within the reinforcement condition. After she met criterion for 3 consecutive weekdays, ACT was implemented in addition to positive reinforcement. The positive reinforcement condition was then implemented for Louise when her baseline levels were stable and Tina had demonstrated an observed change in behavior within the positive reinforcement condition by mastering 2 criterion levels. Identical to Tina, Louise followed the same mastery criteria requirement before moving into the ACT condition. Finally, positive reinforcement was introduced for Linda when her baseline levels were stable and Louise had demonstrated an observed change in behavior within the positive reinforcement conditioning by mastering 2 criterion levels. Like the other 2 participants, Linda followed the same mastery criteria requirement needed before moving on to ACT. Once ACT plus positive reinforcement was introduced, mastery of criterion levels 3 consecutive weekdays before moving to the next criterion level was in place for the remainder of the study. Initial criterion levels were determined by finding the average of baseline duration and subtracting 10 minutes. For the rest of the study, criterion levels were determined by calculating a value 10% less than the previous criterion level. Following completion of the study, the participants and their parents both completed a social validity questionnaire. The questionnaire used rating scales to determine treatment acceptability and perceived effectiveness for those involved. All 3 participants reported high levels of acceptability and liked the ACT sessions. Parents of all the participants also reported high levels of acceptability and effectiveness. Many of the parents reported that the intervention was easy to implement and that they were likely to continue using reinforcement intervention to maintain decreased phone usage with their daughter. The procedure consisted of 4 components: parent training, baseline condition, positive reinforcement, and ACT plus positive reinforcement conditions. Parent training. Parents were told that in order for the study to be successful, they would have to remove their daughter's phone from her possession every night at 8 p.m., unless instructed otherwise by the experimenter, and to keep the phone in their possession until 7 a.m. the next morning. All parents indicated that they would be able to do this. Additionally, prior to intervention, parents were trained on how they would be in charge of administering the positive reinforcement. At 8 p.m., if their daughter had met the criterion level, she was given access to her phone until 9:30. However, if she did not meet the criterion for that day, the phone was taken away at 8 p.m. Parents and the participants both received an automated text message at 7 a.m. indicating the criterion level for that day. All 3 participants began baseline conditions at the same time. During baseline conditions, participants were told to use their phones as they normally would on a daily basis. In this condition, parents were simply to remove their daughter's phone at 8 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next day. No reinforcement or contingencies were in place, and the experimenter simply took data on daily phone usage. During the positive reinforcement condition, the participant was introduced to this condition, and they were informed that each day they would be sent an automated message reminding them the criterion level for reinforcement of that day. They were told that if they met or fell below the criterion level for that day at 8 p.m., they would be given an additional hour and a half of access to their phone for the night. However, if they did not meet the criterion for that day, their phone was removed at 8 p.m. During the ACT plus positive reinforcement condition, participants continued with the same positive reinforcement procedure and also began weekly ACT sessions with an experimenter. In this condition, the participant met with the experimenter once a week for about 30 minutes. Every Monday morning, a brief ACT session was conducted with the participant that focused around academics and her high school experiences. The ACT session focused around academic topics, and each session focused on one of the main components of ACT. A total of 4 ACT curriculums were used. Tina and Louise received 4 weeks of ACT, and Linda was only able to complete 3 due to her accelerated completion of meeting the terminal goal. The 3 areas included for this study were values, committed actions, being present, and self as context. The same mastery criteria, 3 consecutive days of meeting the criterion level, remain the same in this condition.
The results of the current study suggest that positive reinforcement in the form of additional access to phone time is effective in systematically reducing the amount of daily phone usage using a changing criterion design. For the first participant, Linda, her initial baseline was 398 minutes, 6.7 hours. From baseline to final criterion level, she decreased by 40%, and the goal per week was 240 minutes, 4 hours. For the second participant, Louise, her initial baseline was 396 minutes, 6.6 hours, and she decreased by 39%, and her goal was also 240 minutes, 4 hours per week. The third participant, Tina, initial baseline was 398 minutes, 6.7 hours, and she decreased by 40%, and her terminal goal per week was 240 minutes, 4 hours. For Figure 1, a functional relationship was observed between positive reinforcement and a reduction in daily phone usage. The data showed that criterion was more quickly achieved with the implementation of ACT in addition to positive reinforcement.
Although the results show a functional relationship between a change in reinforcement criterion, one limitation to this present study was the lack of being able to measure if ACT was responsible for the change in behavior throughout the study. Experimenters were not able to easily measure if the change in behavior was in correlation with values, committed actions, or shaping goal behaviors. Another limitation experimenters found in the study was phone usage was not monitored throughout the weekend. Participants were not monitored throughout this period, which could have affected the overall results of the study. It is unknown whether or not sediation of phone usage occurring on the weekend, which may in some way have led to low levels of daily duration following Monday after the weekend. There was no diffusion of treatment within the participants within the study. The girls identified as not being friends and were not aware of the other girls in the study. By additional phone usage at night as a reinforcer, it makes it possible for parents to continue to use the intervention as a natural contingency after the study ends. Future research could be generalized to other technology use, such as decreased computer use.